We are live. Okay. Hello, everybody, for yet another session. It's my pleasure to welcome a panel of beautiful and very wise people for a very specific topic. As you can have seen, it's about patient experience as the new battlefield for pharma. Now, I've been in pharma for a long time, and I was at one point global head of compliance, and words like battlefield really got under my skin. So I thought this was a perfect panel topic to work on. And we have the right people to do so. We have two, if I may say, almost peers in pharma. Sofie Roorda, who is global project leader of a big digital program at NovoNordisk. And we also have Myles Furnace, who is the head of digital at IPSEN, at Digital Partnerships. But we also have an expert from the other side, the provider side, with Jim. Jim Pyers is the managing director of the US from Chronolife. And Chronolife is a digital health company that is specialized at remote monitoring of patients, right? Which of course is very acute in these days, and which has been a main topic of this meeting so far. So welcome to the session. When we talk about battlefields, let me just frame it first and refer to the work of Michael Porter, which most of us have had to study at some point in business classes. And Michael Porter says there's basically two battlefields to win in business. One is about strategy, and the other is about excellence in execution, right? And when it comes to strategy, he defines strategy as the conscious choice of which needs of which customers you're going to serve. And we can be very clear, the patient experience is a new entrant in that battlefield, because only a few years ago, all of us were only thinking of healthcare professionals. And the first customers we went to were the patient groups. And now we're beginning to see some companies go also to the individual patient. So that's one battlefield. The other big battlefield, and you need to win on both to succeed, is the battlefield of excellence in execution. And who can claim today that they know how to work with patients with excellence in all stages of the value chain? So with that, I'm going to ask the panel, starting ladies first with Sofie, the question about, give me your idea of battlefield. Where do you see the main battlefield? And then I'll ask the other two panelists to kind of challenge Sofie a little bit or help her to go deeper. Sofie, go ahead.
Thank you, Lori, for the introduction. So, battlefield is a big word, and I definitely think that we have a lot when we bring new technologies in pharma to market. And I could certainly speak a lot about what I experience with digital therapeutics. But since I go first, I want to emphasize the one that's probably most important to highlight. And to me, is that still that from a pharma perspective, the central battle is still around the inefficiency that we see. Taking the example from diabetes that I work within, we still see that 70% of the patients that are on insulin are not receiving good outcomes. So for me, the central battle is still that we have to improve that inefficiency gap. Now, what we then have to acknowledge from a pharmaceutical perspective is that medicine alone to improve those outcomes aren't enough. And that's where I think digital health and what we're working on comes into play, that we have an opportunity to leverage those solutions to improve that outcome. And I think all in all, what that is even more important now when we look in the real world, where there's so much beyond the medicine and the way medicine is used that influences that outcome, where we have to take a much more holistic perspective on that. So I think all in all, we have to generate solutions that provide value to our users so that ultimately improve the outcomes, and we still address the big issue of outcomes that remains our biggest battle, in my opinion.
Good. So Sofie's point to the rest of the panel and the audience, and you can comment in the chat, is that the main battle is still to put the patient centrally. Jim, why don't you, from the other side, non-pharma, and then we go to Myles. What would you ask Sofie or challenge her on that?
Yeah, so I like how Sofie is putting the patient centricity as the key element of looking for outcomes. We have to look at always the patient. I always like to look at the individual patient instead of the group. But so I would ask Sofie, looking at the inefficiency, how does she see pharma solving or helping to solve some of these inefficiencies? There's simple ones like just how do you meet with your doctor on a regular basis, or what can be done in this area to sort out the inefficiencies, Sofie?
Well, that's a big question, I suppose, in general, what we can do to solve some of those inefficiencies. I think I would answer it with an example from something that I work on so that we can relate it. When you start when you're diagnosed with diabetes and you start on a new medication, we often see that it's a big struggle to figure out all of these new things you have to learn to do, and also how to actually adjust and take your medicine. And one of the things that we see from an inefficiency point of view impact the outcomes is that people are not able to self-adjust the medicine. So one example that we have done in one of our products in Brazil is to create a solution that simplifies that process and helps them self-manage and adjust the medicine to ultimately improve the outcome. So really thinking of what are the barriers, not just around the medicine, but also around that encourages a good behavior. So that's one of the things that you could do.
Great. So the challenge was, Pharma, to do that, you need to go from group and averages to individuals. And your point, Sofie, is we can do that if we focus on self-management. Great. Myles.
Yeah, this is a beautiful summary at the beginning. So what you were really emphasizing around that patient experience, it requires us to really know the patient. And we know that pharma traditionally, we didn't do that very well, and there are still a lot of challenges there. Whereas if we look at the tech industry, although they are far from perfect, they understand the customer focus extremely well, better than most. They really, really get it. So what can we learn as pharmaceutical industry, learn from the tech industry in that particular area?
Excellent question. And I really agree with you, Myles, that we really need to understand the patient in order to provide something that is valuable and ultimately improve outcomes. And I think there are two things that the tech industry does very well, and I think we've started to adapt in pharma, and at least I can speak from my personal experience, some of the techniques that we are adapting. And I think the first thing is about learning in the real world. We are very used to bringing finished products to market, and we now have to change our mindset and start to bring a roadmap of value to market where we bring minimal safe products and then improve the product over time. So really trying to learning in the hands of our users and understanding the patient through the behavior and the use of our products. That's one thing. And the second part, which I think is really important, and I can't emphasize how much time I personally spend on that, is really doing usability and market research and involving anthropologists to really understand what are the unmet needs and what is it that we can do to really change the behavior and encourage a good experience that ultimately provides value, but also improves the outcomes in the end. Great. So those are the techniques that I use.
Again, if I may summarize, so Myles challenged you by saying, look, if we want to do that and make the patient really central battlefield, then we're going to have to first get to know the patient. And then your answer is yes, and that's why we need to move in the real world, out of clinical trials, out of marketing, often the real world, which can bring us to the next big battlefield. Jim, where are we on that? You as a technical guy, is the technology there to allow us to finally understand the patient?
Yeah, I think what's happened over the past decade or so is that you see technology evolving in a way that's starting to enable new ways for the patient to interact with the healthcare system. Some good examples of that are my own personal experience. When I realize that technology can have a profound impact on healthcare, even very basic tools through my own family experience. My wife and I suffered through some late-term pregnancy losses, 3 different instances, and really couldn't get a reasonable explanation. We were both young and healthy at the time, 15, 20 years ago. So it put us under a lot of stress trying to build a family. I think that, luckily, I was in the med tech space, and I knew enough about things to actually get my own ultrasound device to monitor the heartbeat of our babies in real time. And being able to do something like that was very expensive, and it was, it was out of pocket expense, and I had to set up and train, myself and my wife on this. So, but what was interesting is then I could share some of that data with our doctors, and this enabled us the doctor to keep a better check on what was going on in our health situation. And it was sort of the beginning of RPM for me, which was, because fast forward today, and technology's changed so much that many of these new capabilities are now offered to the patient instead of having to, figure it out for yourself. So I think maybe just a couple of quick points on some technology changes. Think of 5G, for example. So this is the promise of fiber-like bandwidth for mobile and fixed devices that really can enable a super high quality and reliability that allow for mission critical applications like healthcare. So I think 5G, Wi-Fi 6, these are new things that can change how we're connected together, and how we connect a patient and a doctor, out in the field.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. So what Jim is telling us is that the technology has made incredible strides forward for people to self-empower, which Sofie's point in the real world, which was also a point that came up before. So Sofie, any question or challenge on that technological advance to Myles?
To Jim.
Yeah,
sorry. I just wanted to make sure. So Jim, I was wondering, with all of these technological advancements that we see, how important do you see the aspects of partnering that and collaborating versus actually building it yourselves and partnering for it?
Well, Sofie, there's a lot of different components. Let's take a digital therapy, for example. A digital therapy involves usually a software model that enables some sort of digital assistant. There has to be a proven therapy, so a CBT or a CET, cognitive behavioral therapy, or Q exposure therapy that is proven clinically. There has to be a video, audio, or maybe an XR stream. XR is augmented reality or virtual reality. There's usually a coach, which is the digital assistant in some cases. And then you have the basic components like a mobile phone or a tablet or a wearable. So when you start to look at all these different pieces of a digital therapeutic, there's no way that one company does all that and does it all well. So by definition, you've got to create partnerships between healthcare. So you need the physician who's got the therapy that they want to digitize. You've got to have smart enough people that kind of can cross those bridges and build software that actually delivers on the promise of basically extending that doctor to, 10x or 20x or 100x more patients, and that therapy. And so those kinds of things, I think, require collaboration and partnership among the technology and the healthcare service delivery operations.
Okay, thanks very much. This time it is Myles. Myles, go ahead.
So I'm curious, touching all these different types of technologies, how you see us as Pharma utilizing the value of that real world data that's collected with those existing technologies, and how could we use that to add more value to our patients?
Well, there's some simple things. So, what I always, again, look at my personal case and what would I want. And I definitely look for therapy and treatment versus a pill. And I know this is challenging for pharma because, their core business is around drugs and, drug research. But I would really like to see pharma also spend some of their, very formidable war chest on therapies and treatments and motivations for individuals up front. And I'll give you just a very simple example. Motivating people for healthy lifestyles, eating well, just walking, moving around, exercising, improving their immune system. These are all things that could be motivated and are motivated simply by paying them to do it. So you'd be surprised how that works. There's a big payer in the United States who rolled out a program a few years back called Motion, and it was a very simple premise: if you walk, you get paid. And so supporting these sorts of initiatives in prevention or in the therapy part of the healthcare space could be things I think that pharma could do some very interesting things in, given where they sit.
Thanks, Jim. And it actually builds very nicely in the direction of a question that we have from the audience. Because if I hear you correctly, then also in the example that you gave from your personal life, we already have probably the technology that we need to do a lot. And we don't need to wait for the sexy, fancy stuff like artificial intelligence and all kinds of bots and coaches that are automated. And I'll just give you two examples myself, and then I would ask Sofie and Myles if you can agree with Jim that, in fact, we already have technology to do good. Example number one, I'm currently in a clinical trial related to COVID, by the way, and I have to do an online agenda. And the agenda asks me certain questions twice a week. And if I answer certain questions a certain way, I get an immediate phone call from the doctor for follow-up. For me, that's a great example of simple technology, simple follow-up. Second example is my mother. I bought her one of these bracelets that can detect her fall. Every time she falls, because she's 84, a signal is sent to me, but also to her GP. And if she falls more than, let's say, once in 2 weeks, her GP automatically calls her in or goes and visits. So I think that's basic. And so, Sofie and Myles, do you have examples in your pharma businesses of using already existing technologies, which is Jim's point, to already add value to patients in collaboration with HCP? Who wants to go first?
I don't do it.
Sofie. No, after you, please.
Sofie.
Well, I guess I agree. We already have existing technology, and I think if not, we are definitely on the verge of bringing exciting solutions that can improve that. I think one thing which I would say that definitely we have recently launched is our smart pens, which we have launched that enables patients and physicians to have an improved dialogue around their data and their medicine intake, and especially enabling them from a distance or even in an office to have an improved conversation around what is in reality happening in between, and being able to see the full picture, comparing both in the case of the insulin and blood sugar together, which is a new technology and a new information that we didn't have previously, combining the two pieces of the puzzle, really enabling an improved conversation and enabling physician and patient to take insights based on their data. Good, thank you. Good example. And Myles?
Yeah, really briefly, I think a lot of industry, a lot of other areas are using what the existing technologies are already out there. Like from a mobile phone, that is your connectivity to a patient, right? So we have recently launched patient support applications within the area of oncology to help empower patients, giving them a platform to access information, education, get in contact with their physician where needs be to help support that particular part of the patient journey and try and improve that experience where we can.
Great, great. Thank you very much. We only have like 5 minutes left, and I want to jump therefore to you, Myles, for your battlefield definition and priority. It actually has already come up in the chat indirectly, but Myles, what do you see as the #1 battlefield?
So for me, being a digital innovator in pharma, I think one of the greatest challenges we face is internal. And by that, I mean trying to get stakeholder buy-in to understand where we want to drive this to and align it to a model whereby we can start getting traction inside the organization and moving on to the point you've already touched on there, Lola, in that execution piece. So for me, when we look at digital business models, there's a lot of innovation across the board going on at the moment. We've got lots of new entrepreneurs, we've got new players in healthcare, but a lot of what we're seeing internally at Pharma, not all, but most, is streamlining our current business model, what we already know, whether that's through the value chain, drug discovery, clinical trials, looking at that initial patient experience. But for me, we need to start looking beyond that model, beyond our model, and think not just patient experience, but the customer experience. Who are they? Well, what are the healthcare systems? What are the patients? What are the physicians? What are the healthcare practitioners? What are they moving towards? And if we look at where the demand is moving towards now, healthcare costs is going up, percentage of GDP is increasing. We've always played in that particular spot, but we have to think about adding more value for customers, HCPs, patients. And to try and bring that thinking internally is extremely difficult because it's not just that narrow thinking of what we know, but it's moving beyond that, maybe thinking into those disease areas, how we can bring in. And I'll give you an example now. So we've recently partnered with a wonderful digital health startup called Mendelian in the UK. And they are a company looking at helping to diagnose rare disease patients faster. And we've partnered with them to implement their software solution within primary care. So it's trying to help patients be diagnosed faster, rare disease. So we're really helping that one problem. It's helping physicians get access to information. Not all of them can know about 8,000 rare diseases, but it's integrating it into their clinical workflow to help bring forward who might be associated with a rare disease and all that information there available to them, solving their problem. And it aligns beautifully to what the healthcare system is driving with recent rare disease framework in the NHS. And that is, #1, we need to diagnose rare disease patients faster. We need to help expand the knowledge of rare diseases within our physicians. And all of a sudden, we've got a solution that's solving problems across the value chain and really, really supporting us as well. That's how I think we need to start really thinking about this.
Okay. And I really feel for that because internal collaboration is so important. And my slogan is always to work with patients, start working with your colleagues. Sofie, you want to very quickly, and then Jim very quickly build on that or challenge Myles?
I really like what you said, Myles, about looking at the entire value chain and creating value across. One of the challenges that I personally have, and I'm wondering how you experience, is that in pharma, typically, when we launch our products, we've had years of proved clinical studies and data before we hit the market. But now the data collection starts after we hit the market with digital health solutions. How do you manage that internally, and how important is it to have real-world evidence after?
Good one.
Yeah, it's a super good question. It's really difficult. It's really difficult because it's a very different approach to what we're used to. Whereas I look at that and see this huge opportunity because the real world evidence we start capturing off the back of this, that is where the value is in these solutions. Because it's not just bringing something to market. That's going to have some validation before you get there. But there's then an opportunity to continually demonstrate efficacy in a more streamlined fashion. But beyond that, also allows improvements to develop further SAMD of the data that we capture off the back of that. So it gives us a great opportunity to increase the value of that product we can deliver and add more services onto it. And this constant growing and improvement. So the real world evidence piece is absolutely critical to manage it internally, taking an iterative approach, bringing that value and understanding of how this is going to make sense to us, how that value is going to bring in, not just for the product, but also to other areas of the business as well. We generate lots of insights from this, which is really, really critical to understanding the patient journey, which can be used across the commercial side. The medical teams get a lot of value from that as well. And just starting to sort of make those tangible points more understanding for those colleagues makes it much more easy for them to understand.
Thank you. Jim?
For Myles, we're touching on the consumerization of healthcare, and I think of my first Apple store experience where you walked in and you get your device and you don't really know what happened. You were like, hey, how come I'm not standing in line? How come I got access to this so quickly? What kind of models do you see in healthcare that are similar to changing that experience for the patient? So I'm thinking either of business models or service models that might change the overall experience for the patient, because we were touching on that.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think this is nice because it's come straight through what we've been talking about today. So this is a super broad area, right? There are lots of different areas we can look into, all of which are very not very familiar for pharma. A lot of the opportunity comes from this data that we're capturing, whether it's new wearables, whether it's utilizing new softwares, whether it's capturing what's already there and bringing it together in a way that suddenly becomes more useful for us. It's not about more data, we have a lot of it, right? It's trying to translate that to information, to knowledge, and then to clinical utility, and putting it in a way that we can start trusting and implementing it in the right way within healthcare. That then opens up doors that you've touched on already around prevention and prediction and accessibility. Those models around how do we suddenly fit into a prevention market? It's where healthcare systems want to go. It's where a patient wants to go. I would like to stay healthy for as long as possible, as I'm sure everyone else does. How do we start bringing in those new models? And this is where it's very early, really, really early, to start exploring how is this going to translate. And for me, I think pharma is actually going to be moving away just drug delivery, but adding more services around that. And that might be giving more value for less. And these are the sort of things that we really need to start exploring, because we haven't got to a point yet where we're being forced to. And it's really about making these key strategic decisions and moving into these sort of areas.
Fantastic. We could go on forever. Thank you so much, Myles and Sofie. I'm going to summarize very briefly for the audience that this panel already identified 3 potential battlefields for you. Sofie talked about bringing the focus to the patient and really putting the patient there at least the same level as the HCP is probably the battlefield, and get into the real life of the patient, not into the studies. Jim said, guys, technology is not your biggest hurdle. It's already out there. Use it and start learning about your individual customer. And Myles said, yep, to do that, we have to start working better internally, not herd insights, and really work together, and also externally. So the bottom line here is that there's 2 actionable things that this panel recommends you to do. Is number 1, get to know your patient experience. And number 2, work together to address the needs in that. And with that, thank you for a great panel. Thank you, Sofie. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Myles. And great questions from the audience. Unfortunately, we couldn't answer all of them. Thank you, and have a wonderful rest of the meeting.
Thanks so much, guys. Have a great day. Thanks.
Everybody, thank you.